I'm her audience.
Do you know what a savior sibling is? It's a genetically modified human embryo for the benefit of an older sibling who is medically challenged. Some of the ways this savior sibling can benefit the medically challenged child is by providing organs, blood, bone marrow, stem cell, umbilical cord blood, and a bunch of other things. I believe that savior siblings should be illegal because science and money will be controlling the human race. It also will affect us evolving and the welfare of the child. This is so important because all of us are the next generation of parents, leaders of the community, lawmakers, and what we decide to do will affect the generations to come after us, our children, grandchildren. I've done a lot of research on savior siblings and genetically modified embryos. So the way that they genetically modify the embryos is an inexpensive tool called CRISPR, which stands for an obnoxiously long word that none of us will remember. So if you remember the word inexpensive, that word in the science world is completely different to all of us. Inexpensive in the science world apparently means 18 grand just for the CRISPR tools and not the lab, the scientist, any of that. So the people choosing to genetically modify these human embryos to save their dying child will be the wealthy. It's concerning knowing that the wealthy can control how we are going to be, how our human race is going to evolve and how we are going to be in the future. All this information came from Point of View database, and the article is called Keep CRISPR Safe. The next thing that could really be affected by human genome editing is the evolution of us humans. In the last 2,000 years, we have evolved significantly, and to our eyes, it doesn't look very significant, but to the people who research this and know about this and learn about this, feel like this is a very significant part in our evolution. And those would be menstruation ages. So women start menstruating a lot earlier than they used to, and they stop menstruating a lot later than they used to. And that's giving us a bigger span to have children, so you don't have to have children right away and then die from giving birth. And speaking of birth, birth rates have gone down a lot through the years, which is decreasing the amount of maternal deaths during birth. So those are very significant in our evolution, and messing with those by editing your DNA strands will affect us humans a lot. So if you think back to sophomore biology, we have 23 chromosomes and 46 DNA strands. So basically when they're editing your genomes, they're taking a little nucleic acid off of one of the strands, and by taking those off, that's changing how we have evolved in the past 2,000 years even. One of the ways that African Americans have evolved, you hear sickle cell anemia a lot when speaking of African Americans, and you also hear that malaria is super common over in Africa. So the way that African Americans have evolved to stop dying and getting malaria so often is by sickle cell anemia, because in sickle cell anemia, your red blood cells are like this instead of like this, so malaria can't attack your red blood cells. Sickle cell anemia is also a horrible disease, but that's how African Americans have evolved from getting malaria. So if you're messing with that through human genome and through CRISPR, you're affecting how your children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren are going to evolve, and just in general the human race. So one of the most concerning parts about savior siblings, CRISPR, editing your genes, is the child's welfare. As humans, we know we're not supposed to treat children like objects. They're supposed to be loved, cared for. We have a bunch of laws behind this called CAPTA is one of them. This is a really big law about child safety, child neglect, child abuse. So I spoke to Becky, who is an officer over with Social Services in Minnesota. And she said that after working in that kind of department for so long, you start to see the traits of toxic households, toxic families. And she says it would not surprise her to see these kind of kids showing up in her office because the situation can probably more than likely end up being toxic. Not having gene editing for Save Your Siblings illegal, but having neglect and abuse of children legal is like the pot calling the kettle black to me. I feel like having these Save Your Siblings made just to benefit something else or someone else is setting them up for being neglected, not being treated like a child should. But then we have abuse and neglect illegal, so I just feel like they're contradicting, like, that CRISPR and Save Your Siblings should be illegal as well. And what are going to happen to these Save Your Siblings once they're used for their purpose? Are they going to end up in foster care? Are they going to be neglected, abused? What's going to happen to them after they've been used for what they were wanted for? So all of the child abuse laws came from asf.hhs.gov. So in conclusion, I think Save Your Siblings should be illegal. Money will be largely controlling the human race and how us humans are evolving and how our descendants will be evolving, and also just the welfare of the child in general. Now that you know about Save Your Siblings, it's your call whether you think it's ethical or unethical.